Hosted by you/OwnGTechie. 6 months ago, a family in my wife's, 30F, and my, 30M, church was leaving the state. Their son, 18M, whom we will call Fred, was very opposed to the move and resisted his family's decision to relocate. I have been a mentor to this kid since he was 16. His family left anyway, and believing that 18-year-olds are adults, they did not provide him with the resources to support himself. My wife and I live in a larger house, nearly 4,000 square feet, in a major metropolitan city, where we had already put together an incredible suite for guests. The room includes a bathroom, TV area, furnishings, and a kitchenette. Naturally, we offered this room to Fred. We drafted a lease for the room, including common areas such as the home gym, theater, kitchen, and dining room, everywhere except our bedroom and offices. On principle, I wanted him to pay something for rent, but I knew he couldn't afford the typical one-bedroom rents in the area, $1,800 plus, so we set the rent at $200. Fred works 1 day a week at a local grocery store and generally pays rent on time, though he was 2 months late once. Due to his situation, we have become like pseudo-parents to him. We've taught him how to use a lawnmower, cook for himself, fix his car, and helped him with his resume, among other things. He is using this time to find himself and frequently asks for our life advice. We enjoy helping him out. About 3 months in, I noticed ants near his door, and while dealing with the ants, I discovered his room was incredibly dirty, food and garbage were everywhere. I reminded him of a clause in the lease that prohibits waste, and after bringing up the possibility of eviction, I helped him clean his room, with me doing the vast majority of the work. 2 days ago, he left his door open, and I could smell spoiling food from the other side of the house. I tried to locate the source and was shocked by the state he was living in. There was food everywhere, with most of the boxes containing only half of their original contents. Many of these takeout items had been purchased weeks prior. Now here's the rub, I am legally his landlord, but I'm also playing the role of an uncle or adopted father. If I evict him, he will be homeless because he can't afford anything in this area. This seems to be a mental health issue. He doesn't apply himself to get a better job, works only 1 day a week, has no girlfriend or boyfriend, and lives in squalor like I've only seen in our /neck beard nests. I want him to be happy and healthy, but I also don't want my house to be at risk of a pest infestation, horrific smells, and other damage. How can I approach him and resolve this issue? First update 4 months later. Since I last posted in late April, I wanted to give you all an update on the situation. This is a long update, so without further ado, the news is not good. After my last post, I took Fred to a local fair, Earth Day, where we could enjoy some junk food, watch remote control boat racing, look at some plants, and talk. I sat him down and explained that significant changes were needed. I told him that he was damaging my property and that it was painful for me to see him suffering in such clutter and filth. I also told him that within the next 2 weeks, he needed to seek out a therapist to talk to. Due to his perceived paranoia about his mom and dad finding out what he tells the therapist, I explained to him that the therapist would not legally be able to discuss anything with me, his parents, or anyone else. Furthermore, I told him that if he did this, I would be willing to completely waive his rent. Fred agreed to seek therapy. 3 days later, however, he got into a car crash while texting and driving. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but Fred's car was not as fortunate. Initially, I thought this might be good for him. He was working 1 day per week at a large chain grocery store located 1.5 hours away from the house. Fred showed zero initiative to transfer stores, so I thought this would force him to get a local job. I also believed that, without the car, he could focus on himself. Unfortunately, this theory proved to be incorrect. 3 weeks passed, and the situation worsened significantly. He stopped leaving his room, didn't get a therapist, didn't find a job, and even stopped bathing. The only time he left the house was to pick up fast food, where he would sit in the store for hours, simply watching people. A noticeable smell began to emanate from that wing of the house. To address this with him and further assess what I could do to help, I invited him out to lunch. As we got into my car to drive to lunch, Fred informed me that he needed to clean out his totaled vehicle within the next 2 hours, or it would be sent to the scrapyard. I learned that the shop had been threatening this for the past week, but Fred didn't believe they were serious and had stopped taking their calls. We changed course and headed to the repair shop, where I dropped him off near his car to gather his belongings. I spent about 30 minutes looking at new car offerings and texted him to see if he needed help. He replied, "No, I'm almost done." I walked back to my car, watched a documentary for another half hour, and texted him again. He responded, "Almost done." I turned on another YouTube documentary, watched it to the end, and texted him once more. He replied, "You can pull around so we can load the trunk." I pulled into the repair parking lot but didn't immediately see him by his car. I parked and noticed a group of mechanics talking with each other. When I asked if they had seen Fred, they pointed over to the curb, where Fred was curled up in a fetal position, sobbing hysterically. Concerned, I asked if he was okay, thinking he might be hurt, but he didn't respond. I asked if he needed help, and he asked me to move his belongings from his car to mine. What I found in his car was shocking. The car was filled with food debris, half-eaten chicken nuggets, drinks, burgers, and other fast food items piled up in a way that made it clear how severe his mental state had become. The food was stacked from the floor to the seats, both in the passenger seat and the rear seats of his SUV. The mess even extended into the trunk. The smell was unbearable, like what I imagine hell might be. Keep in mind that these food items, most of which were months old, had been baking in the car under the May Florida sun. I had to dig through the filth to find his belongings, clothes, a toolbox, anime prawn, and other items. Meanwhile, Fred was still in hysterics. After gathering what I could find, I asked Fred to double-check my work. He then approached the front of the car and removed one of the windshield wipers to remember the car. Fred then asked me to get his socket wrench set so he could take the spare tire. I put my foot down, explaining that the spare probably wouldn't fit his next car and that I wasn't going to allow a tire to be stored in my house. He sobbed even more, so I called my wife to confirm that I wasn't being unreasonable, which she did. I told him it was time to leave. We left and went to lunch in silence after the 4-hour ordeal. After picking up food and returning home, I sat Fred down and explained that he wasn't healthy. I pointed out that he hadn't found a job, hadn't sought therapy as he had agreed to, even after I found a therapist for him and sent him the intake forms 2 weeks prior, and that I suspected his room was in the same disarray as his car. He denied this. I then notified him that I would be inspecting his room in 48 hours, as allowed by the lease. What I found in Fred's room was horrifying. As I suspected, it was trashed. Food containers were piled up over his bed, and there was only a small path for him to reach the door. I told him he had a week to clean it up and also drafted a formal notice of the situation. Fred did not clean his room within the week, so I informed him that I would be contacting his parents and evicting him if he did not move out by the end of the month. He cried in response. His parents were shocked. I put quotes around this because I find it hard to believe they were unaware of his mental health issues and tendencies before leaving Fred to live here, especially when the problems are so severe. As his father was on his way down, Fred ran away. He took an Uber and was missing for 24 hours. Fred eventually returned home 2 hours before his father's arrival, but as anticipated, his room was barely packed. His father and I ended up cleaning out his room, and it turned out I had only seen about half of the mess. His dresser, nightstand, under the bed, and the closet were all packed with food. I will never eat Popeye's chicken again. The 4-month-old, barely consumed chicken bucket in the dresser was too much for me to handle. There were also 2-liter bottles of urine. My wife had purchased Vera Bradley towels for the bathroom Fred was using. I didn't have the heart to tell her that a few were just thrown away because they were covered in biological waste. The carpet, which was new to the room, crunched underfoot and was covered in pizza toppings, sauce, and similar drippings. His father cried throughout the process, and I puked twice. Fred frantically packed his belongings, including a secretive box he didn't want us to touch or lift into the van, a mystery I will never know the answer to. The eviction was successful. I offered to pay for Fred's college if he started therapy, but his parents kicked him out soon after he returned home. He's now living alone in a trailer in the rural Ohio woods that his parents bought for him. College started a few weeks ago, but I didn't have to pay since he still hasn't attended therapy. We've since cleaned up the room, replaced the bed and much of the furniture. The carpet had to be specially treated, though it probably would have been better to replace it entirely. The whole ordeal cost thousands of dollars, emotional trauma, and has left me with a strong aversion to fast food. These are the takeaways from the experience. Fred no longer responds to my texts, and I can only assume that I'm now a bad guy in his life story. I really wish him the best, and my heart breaks for him whenever I think about the situation. Earlier this month, we received a misaddressed Amazon package for him, a massive package of sauce concentrate for restaurants.